I want to welcome everybody to this discussion about masks and preventing COVID-19. As you may know, on June 12th, the City Council passed a resolution that recommended that people wear face masks. And that directive applies to properties, particularly that adjoin Winslow Way from the Washington State Ferry to the Grow Avenue. People in that area are strongly encouraged to wear a face covering when they can't maintain 6 feet of distance from others who don't share their household. This is right in line with what the World Health Organization announced earlier this month. They advised that government should encourage the public to wear masks where there is widespread transmission and where physical distancing is difficult. And I would say that downtown Winslow certainly qualifies as that kind of a place. And there's no doubt that people wearing masks can spread the transmission of COVID-19. We've heard that right here from doctors who've been visiting this program in recent weeks. So is encouragement enough? Should businesses have government support to require mask wearing? That's the topic that we're talking about today and takes on some relevance as we move towards phase 3 of reopening and see increasing traffic on our island from Seattle. City Council member Kirsten Hytopoulos is joining us this morning. Tomorrow, I understand that you are going to be presenting a proposal as the City Council revisits the mask issue, looking at amplifying the extensions of the directive that you've already passed. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been thinking about and give us some perspective. We'll hold our comments for a bit and let you describe what it is that you've been working on, and then give people the opportunity to raise questions or comments.
Sure. As a little background, when we came to pass that resolution, it was after a conversation where we were weighing, should we do a resolution strongly encouraging, or should we do an ordinance that mandates masks? And we really struggled with it as a group, and we wound up being able to pass a resolution. Some of us were dissatisfied with that resolution, and fortunately what seemed to come out of the conversation was a near consensus, I would say, of folks on the council saying if a subcommittee would go out and create an ordinance that didn't involve enforcement, like in the forms of police contact and or fines, et cetera, that the council might entertain an actual mandate. So that's what the subcommittee's been working on. The subcommittee's made up of Michael Pollock, Christy Carr, a new council member, and myself. And the ordinance that we've come up with is attached to the city agenda right now for consideration tomorrow. What we came up with was a compromise, we believe, which has a staged approach of enforcement. So before I get to enforcement, just kind of backing up, rather than just applying to Winslow Way, it applies to all places that are open to the public, which would include sidewalks and parking lots and such. It would require masks to be worn, face coverings to be worn. That's an important distinction because we're not trying to force people to wear certain types of face coverings, just minimal face coverings as the CDC or the WHO would think were reasonable. In places where people cannot keep 6 foot distance. That's the overarching mandate. What we have then put in, which most of these ordinances or directives have around the country and around the world, would be that there are places where we assume you cannot reasonably keep 6 foot distance. And that would be inside grocery stores and drugstores and those sorts of retail type establishments. And so in other words, it would not be assumed that when you're walking down Winslow Way, you have to be wearing a mask if you can follow what is already the governor's orders, which is that you need to keep 6 foot distance from someone outside of your household. The way enforcement looks would be that we've decided to create 3 levels of concern in the community that the council will declare. And the first one that we go right into with the passage of the ordinance, level 1, simply says that we will not have police contacts or warnings. There will not be an infraction involved in this. We will just use a scheme of education and outreach. If for some reason, if viruses spike, if we get different direction from public health officials, the governor, and I think a lot of us think the governor is probably going to wind up mandating masks soon anyway, and this will be moot. But if we get other direction, if people just still are not wearing masks to a noticeable degree, the city council has the option of bringing forward a resolution, so a whole new independent action that says we're going to move into the next level of enforcement. And if the city council does that, and if we pass that, we would move into level 2. Level 2 would simply be that now warnings can be given. So police officers could, someone could report this, and a police officer could respond, or a police officer could notice a group of kids hanging out all together without masks, and approach them and say, "Hey guys, it's the law that you're supposed to be wearing masks." And that would be it. There wouldn't be a civil infraction, any kind of fines. And then if we were still concerned and those same factors occurred again, rise in virus, rise in infection rate, et cetera, we would have another resolution. And then we would move to what some of us would like to go to right away, but I'm not sure that we have the votes for that. And that would be that it's a civil infraction, just like a parking ticket, where you could be cited with what would start as a $25 fine. So that's the overall scheme. So we'd start off in at level 1. There's also a notation in the ordinance which just restates the law that exists already in Washington, which is that if a business owner has asked someone to leave for not wearing a mask, just like they can right now if someone's walking in and carrying a knife, or not wearing a shirt, not wearing shoes, if a business owner asks someone to leave and they refuse to leave or wear a mask, the business owner already has the ability to contact the police department and ask for that person to be asked to leave. And because that at that point is criminal trespass, it's a misdemeanor. And the police officer would have the option at that point to either cite someone for criminal trespass or to just give them a warning. Let's see. And I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I could look for it while we're here. And that is that is something that's actually done on the island regularly out of businesses. I think we've had 100 and something, or a few hundred in the last year. So in other words, this is not a strange thing. It's something that's available to businesses. So I think that covers the bulk of it. I noticed that you're frozen, Reed. Are you still there? We've all experienced this, of course, in these meetings, right? We could wait for him to come back. I think that I would just add some more interesting information, or might be interesting information. We have had a response through city email that I've never seen in my life. As a previous time on city council, I was on city council, 7 years ago, through very controversial issues, nor in the time I've been on this time, or any time I've been closely watching and communication with council members. It's been shocking. I've been putting them into a spreadsheet. They're about 90% for a mandate and 10% against. And I was up till 2 o'clock in the morning doing that last night, trying to read them all and respond to them, and only got back to Friday morning. There was 100 emails. There were 100 emails between Friday morning and last night. And they're coming in rapid succession this morning. So this is an issue that is definitely of interest to the community. And so far, strongly, the community's in favor of a mandate.
So I should just note that probably the best thing to do is to send the council as a whole your comments. That's the group that will make the decision tomorrow about what the next step is. And their email is council@bainbridgewa.gov. Yeah,
exactly.
Are you going to email that out?
Yeah, I will definitely email that out after this discussion.
Great, thanks very much.
And I would add that what really helps is, and that's what we've been seeing a lot of, which is really amazing, is your personal experiences and comments. How does this affect you? What is your background? What have you seen that concerns you, if anything, that you think we need to be dealing with? And I think we'd all love to hear, what do you think about enforcement? Should this be a civil infraction? Should we just educate? That helps all of us understand even more, clearly what the community's thinking.
Any other comments? If there are, just open up your microphone and I'll call on you. Joe.
Yeah. Hi, Reed. Hi, Kirsten. Good to see you and everybody. Yeah, Kirsten's absolutely right. We've gotten well north of 100 emails on this. And like you said, my laptop keeps pinging another mask email. So let's just say we hear you, council hears you loud and clear how important this is. And I can assure you that we share your concern. a couple things going on is I'm totally in favor of the resolution that was passed. I'm still reviewing the ordinance that Kirsten just described, and I have some outstanding concerns. But let me just say an approach I'm taking that I'm hoping my colleagues, Kirsten included, will endorse. In addition to the question tomorrow of do we pass an ordinance or do we not pass an ordinance, there'll be a discussion led by me as to an aggressive promotion campaign on mask wearing. This would entail a couple things. One, the city purchasing a supply of masks using what we call CARES funding. This is money that the federal government's providing us that we can use for COVID-related expenses. And second, like I said, an aggressive campaign to encourage people to wear masks. I just got off the phone over the weekend with the Bainbridge Prepares group, and we're prepared to propose getting a core group of credentialed volunteers to message the importance of wearing masks in the community. There's be details discussed tomorrow. So I'm hoping whatever we decide, ordinance or stay with resolution, that in any case, we will approve an aggressive outreach campaign with free masks for folks. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it sounds to me like that kind of answers the question that Sheila Kerwin is asking, which is how do we notify people who are coming off the ferry? That was one of the questions that showed up in chat.
And I would like to say, first of all, I completely endorse Joe's efforts. We're at such a, with our Open Public Meetings Act limitations, it's kind of silly. The three of us are over here working on the ordinance, and we can't coordinate with Joe while he's working on this aspect. And so I, for one, as just myself as an individual council member, am absolutely on board with purchasing masks. I mean, quite frankly, even if we had to dip into city coffers, I'd be okay with that. CARES funding, that's icing on the cake. And I think that those of us who've drafted the ordinance anticipate and hope for a very fulsome campaign consistent with what Joe's talking about for this phase one, and hope that we don't move out of phase one. I better watch out. Level one, it's kind of dangerous territory there. The only thing I'd say that, and here I'm making a pitch to Joe too, on the difference between the mandate and not, is that what we've heard from employees in stores, and I think we'll wind up hearing from the volunteers if they make an effort to do outreach on the ground, is that it's kind of scary. And what they've asked for is a legal mandate so they can say, hey, don't shoot the messenger. It's not, I'm not here to debate with you the value of masks, the efficacy of masks, whether it's okay or not for me to ask you to wear a mask. All I'm here is to let you know it is required. It's the law. That's already decided. Here's where you can get them. Here's how to use them. Here's why they're great. But we've already stopped the conversation then about should we? And so we've gotten direct emails on that. I've heard from people, and I've seen comments around the country from employees who feel much more comfort when they can just say, hey, see that notice on the window as you walk in? It's an ordinance. I can't do anything about that. Okay.
It looks like Patty Lyman may have a question or comment.
Yeah, a couple of things. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, great. I'm 71, believe it or not, and I'm very healthy, but I do not feel safe walking down Winslow, and it continually on Winslow Way, and it really has to do with the number of people that are walking around without their masks in Winslow Way. I had to walk through yesterday. I had to stop and get something very quickly at TNC. There was a man wearing shorts and a t-shirt sitting on a bench smoking a cigarette. The smoke was going everywhere. He was not wearing a mask. That's a great way to pass COVID-19 if he was positive. And I can smell it through my mask. What I would love to see as something saying no smoking on Winslow Way, even, but just in terms of protection of the people there. But the main thing is the kind of comments I get are, well, you're 71, you should stay home. And I'm a bicyclist. I'm going to do a bike ride after I leave this meeting. I'll be doing 18, 20 miles on Bainbridge Island. I do that 3 or 4 times a week. And I feel like I'm really healthy, but I don't know, because I'm 71, that if I get exposed to COVID-19, that I will get really sick. I also have type A blood, and I'm also a healthcare provider, and I'm very aware of all the reports. Talking to a friend whose partner is very high up in working with COVID-19 in King County, her understanding is that a lot of the people out in the community do not really understand why they should wear a mask. Even though they've been educated, they don't get it. And the education part is really important, but I don't know where we have to go to really try to explain to people, beyond trying to base it on regulations, that you know, they are harming other people if they don't wear a mask, and I think that's a really important part of the education.
Yep. I agree.
And the only last thing I want to say is I really don't think the first stage is going to work in terms of keeping asking people who wear masks on Winslow. Because,
so your impression is that we should have more aggressive mandates earlier. Okay,
right.
That's good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Patty, for showing up. Bonnie, do you have a comment?
Well, I like the idea of, I'm not sure which terminology it is, but whatever, the mandate, so that it takes the people off the hook that are in the stores. That seems excellent to me. And you know, getting the free masks and having them available and all that, I don't think it's a matter of people can't afford the masks that are here. That doesn't seem to be an issue. It's way more a mindset and sort of an entitlement, and they're not wanting to be told anything. So I don't know how you get past that big hurdle. We are downtown quite a bit. We have our masks, and much of the time, most of the people do have their masks, and that is very comforting. You know, is there some assurance you know, you're not totally okay, but you feel like you're pretty okay. So I just don't think it's a matter of they don't have access to masks. It's just they don't want to do it.
Any thoughts on that, Kirsten?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think we all know that there are going to be people who have access to masks and are making a political statement, et cetera. I think that what we want to do is, A, we want to be sure that if there is an access to masks issue, we have addressed it. B, that it can't be an argument that, hey, I left one at home. And C, I think a lot of the distribution of masks is going to be useful for people walking off the boat who are coming from other areas. And I don't think we have any reason to think we won't just have people from Seattle, but people from out of state who are visiting and coming over like they normally do, who will have come from a different ethic, different circumstances, and they really genuinely will need a mask. So I agree with you. I think this won't, none of what we're talking about is going to take care of every case. But I think that our goal is to get as many people in face coverings as possible. And if we had 98% of people in face coverings, we're doing really well. We have very few people we have to dart around, but even 95%. I also wanted to address that issue that was raised about senior citizens and other vulnerable groups in the community being told to basically just go home and stay home for 12 to 18 months. I find very offensive, and that's one of my reasonings behind pushing for a mandate is, especially people who are single being asked to stay home and alone and not be able to socialize and be part of their community. That we know that in itself would create an entirely new mental health crisis. And between the vulnerable members of the population and also this is disproportionately, this illness has affected people of color as well. The largest group of people of those who have become infected in the state, whose race was recorded, the largest group is Hispanic. So we also know that that vulnerable sector of our community is more at risk, as well as the workers in our essential services who often don't have the bargaining power to just take off, or the choices to take off and go to a different job. They're there for 8 hours a day, and they're being subjected to hundreds of people. So if 25% of them don't have masks, that's a huge impact versus us trying to dart past someone. So this is about protecting vulnerable people too. And that's really, I think, one of the main justifications for a mandate. And why I personally, again, I think it's serious enough that I would like to see more enforcement. But again, we have to find a compromise that's gonna get on the books with City Council, and that's what we're trying to do.
Jim Hayner.
There are signs, as you all know, at TNC saying you need a mask, just ask. But nobody enforces that. And I see people without masks a fair amount there. I was just saying that if we have an enforceable mandate that manages the people who come in on the ferry, which they're very voluminous, as you well know. It says that we have a ordinance that says you have to wear masks here as part of this educational opportunity that we have coming up that you've mentioned, Kristen. And maybe coordinate the thing with the Washington State Ferry, saying that they have an ordinance here. When you're on the island, you wear a mask. Here's one if you need one. So just I agree with what you're doing. I agree 100% with what you're saying. I think that we should have a mandate.
And I'd like to add for signage purposes, what the committee that's drafted the ordinance is anticipating for the basic signage is that all businesses must post in their windows signage provided by the city that we actually anticipate to be just very naked, legal type notice language. This would be in addition to the work that Joe would be talking about. I hope the city will also be coordinating with Bainbridge Preparers and others to do a large, inviting, and educational component. But we think that it's important that there is a clear notice in every window that just basically says, pursuant to Bainbridge Island Municipal Code, this ordinance, city seal, wearing masks in these situations are required, period. And so there will, whatever we do with the educational component, even in stage one, level one, we want to see. I think we've won a large part of the battle if we have a mandate and it's just very clear everywhere you look that this is legal. It's not just a request.
Great.
You've answered my question, and I appreciate it, and I'm 100% in agreement with you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I would say either for Kirsten, or since Joe is here, we can pose a question in his direction as well. Joe, the current recommendation is focused on a specific part of downtown, and it sounds like the ordinance is looking at a larger area. Do you think that the whole island is vulnerable to this situation, and would the need for communication stretch from our sea to shining sea, if you will?
Yeah, from shore to shore. Well, I would say certainly Winslow area, of course, but I would consider the neighborhood centers. I'm up in the north end, so we're not quite as populated as other parts of the island. But I just noticed going down to Linwood Center. I mean, that's a small town in and of itself down there. So I think we would need to look strategically, let's just say maybe the neighborhood centers in addition to Winslow, and let me just address sort of an approach. How maybe this is almost philosophical when it comes to getting people to do something, and I'm of the view, taking a page of what I've seen with the Black Lives Movement, that perhaps there's some things that law enforcement is not really an ideal solution to affecting change. And I see that applicable here. Now, I could get outvoted, tomorrow. We'll see. But I'm of the view that when it comes to getting people to do things that is really for the best for them and for everyone else, that rather than making it a law enforcement issue, because that's what this ordinance is, it is a law enforcement issue. And haven't we learned that isn't always a good solution under the what we've seen, let's just say the last month or so, that instead we focus on having folks who are more, it's a more appropriate response. In other words, have doctors speak about this, have healthcare workers. I happen myself to be a Bainbridge Island emergency medical responder volunteer. Folks like us who really would speak to the issue, because this is a healthcare issue, it is not a law enforcement issue. So I just want to bring that up. I mean, think we are all in favor of people wearing masks. But frankly, I'm concerned by making it a legal requirement. We're kind of following into the same old pattern that we've done, trying to legislate our way out of problems and then putting it on the BIPD to resolve it. And I don't think this is a Bainbridge Island Police Department issue, in my view. So I just want to bring that out.
Thank you. Any other comments? Questions? Obviously, the decision, the discussion is going to go on tomorrow night at City Council. So if you have an interest in expressing a view to our council, the best way to do that is to send an email. And I will, to those of you who are registered with the Senior Center, send out a note after this meeting with the address. But it's pretty straightforward. It's just council@bainbridgewa.gov. council@bainbridgewa.gov. Here's an interesting idea from Patty Lyman, who spoke earlier. She's saying if we were to turn Winslow Way into a pedestrian mall, we would have a lot more room for people to socially distance. Kirsten or Joe, either of you want to comment on that?
Well, we've heard that, and I don't know if we've talked about it yet, Joe. I think we've heard from business owners they'd rather we not. But you probably know more about that than I do. I'd love to see that during the
Patty, thanks for that suggestion. Let's just say this is an ongoing conversation. I've been talking with members of the business community, and we're not quite there, I'll just say, with the idea of restricting Winslow Way to increase pedestrian and bike riders. Personally, I'm totally in favor of it, but this is an ongoing conversation, and I'll just say there is some resistance to it.
Dave, you posted something in the chat. Do you want to comment on that? I can't quite open it right now to find out what it's about. I'll take that as a no, and I'll share the link when we get around to sending out an email.
Yeah, how to turn on my mic.
Yes, Dave, go ahead.
Sorry, this is my first time on Google. I've been Zooming mostly. Well, just that link to the NPR latest information on face coverings as the primary and distancing, the primary way to go forward until next year, whenever they have vaccines. That was from my daughter, who's in emergency management in a doctoral program right now, and she's actually worked with the city over the years, off and on, in that capacity. So I found it a very fascinating and relevant to this very topic. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Okay, we'll share that link. Richard, do you have a comment?
Yes. What I'm thinking here is there's a law or a rule that people are not permitted to walk around town with pistols or rifles. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. I'm not up on our open carry law. Do you know, Joe? Because I think you may be able to have a permit to do that.
You know,
You can have a permit to do that,
Yeah.
but what if somebody does not have a permit and they're walking around town with a weapon? What happens? How do people stop that? Because that affects my health also.
Well, I see in chat we have input from Sal de Rosalia that you don't actually need a permit to carry. You have a permit. That makes sense. It's correct to carry a concealed weapon. So sadly, you probably can walk around with a gun. I'm not sure whether. I think though that a business owner may be able to, if they post it, require that you do not enter with a weapon. And that would be an example of what I was talking about earlier, where if somebody posts that and you come in, they can say, hey, sorry, we don't let people come in here with a big knife, out there on their hip. You're going to have to leave. They have the right to do that.
And we have that. We have a right as the senior center or an organization to say you can't enter without a mask.
Yeah, right. Exactly. The problem really becomes walking down Winslow Way. I mean, that's a problem in a lot of, it's a problem with, again, yes, I think someone can walk down Winslow Way with a huge knife strapped to their hip or a gun. And then there's all these issues of how do you regulate people walking on the street? And how would you do that without a police presence in particular? And that is something I think we'd all like to avoid.
I know people go into City Hall and carry a weapon, and there's nothing we can do about it. I can't say I'm happy with that.
Did you say people can come into City Hall carrying a weapon?
Yep, and they do.
Okay, well, so there are some. I mean, there are some.
I think guns are a little bit more of a safety issue, wouldn't you say?
In certain parts of the world, yeah, but in Bainbridge Island, I wouldn't. I think it would be unnecessary. If I saw somebody walking around carrying a gun, I would question the reason and their sanity. And much the same, I feel the same way nowadays about people who are just disregarding the public good by not wearing a mask.
I completely understand that perspective. I mean, I think yes, Joe. I think if someone's brandishing a weapon, it looks like they're about to shoot someone. It's probably more dangerous than someone walking at me down the aisle at Safeway. But frankly, I have asthma. I don't know whether or not I've tried to figure out whether I'm extra vulnerable, but I take precautions. And when I'm walking down the aisle and I've got my mask on and there's a couple of people standing there on the aisle chatting and laughing away with no mask on, and I have to walk through that or choose not to, that does feel aggressive to me. That does feel to me like someone is brandishing a weapon. They're being reckless with something. They're being reckless with something dangerous to the public. And I guess it's just a matter of perspective, but it does feel irresponsible and it does feel dangerous to me.
And that's my whole point.
Right.
That's the way I feel nowadays about people who are being reckless and disregarding what is proper and prudent for the rest of us.
Thank you, Richard. And I'm gonna thank you. And I think we get the comment, and I appreciate your clear enunciation of that. So, any other questions about the ordinance or about how communication more generally might be shared in the community? I think that this has been a very informative and helpful discussion. I feel like we have a good idea about what's going to be before the council tomorrow night. And I do realize that as we move into, now we're going to go to phases, phase 2 and maybe phase 3, that we're going to see a lot more movement of people around the island, people here and also visitors. The island has a lot of tourism as part of our ongoing efforts. And as the summer comes in, the downtown businesses are going to obviously want to welcome people. So having some sort of a strategy going into that is, I think, important. How that's going to affect the senior center actually is something that we'll be talking about on Wednesday. We're going to talk about how the senior center is planning to reopen and what kinds of things we'll do first and what kinds of precautions we're going to ask you to take. I want to thank Kirsten for showing up today, and thank you, Joe, as well for showing up. I appreciate your taking the time with us.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Very well done. I appreciate it.